5. Do you want to get us started?
Yes, and thank you everyone for joining today. As Melvin was mentioning, if you'd like to rename yourself in the chat, you can go to your screen, basically like your own name, the three dots, and then you can rename yourself. We'd love to see your names, organization, whatever title you like to put in the chat. Today's webinar will be recorded too, so if you do drop off or anything happens, you will be able to see the recording after today's webinar. So thank you for joining. I'm Julie Hancher. I'm Executive Director of Green Philly, and we are so excited to have you here today. We will have a poll question that will pop up momentarily because we'd love to know where you are in your investing journey. So once you see that poll, feel free to fill it out. And for those of you who are new to us, Green Philly is our region sustainability news and community platform. We help people live more sustainably through journalism, events, and conversations just like this one. So we cover everything from clean energy policy to composting, eco explainers, and local climate and sustainability solutions, which is always the focus of how that can translate and help you locally. And that is really one reason why we're here today. So I'm guessing if you're here, you care about the environment. And maybe we can all just take a deep breath for a second because it's been hard to care about the environment and watch the news today, for sure. Today, every day this year. And we're seeing environmental protections being challenged. Just last week, the EPA repealed its endangerment finding, which was a legal basis to regulate greenhouse gases. And at least in Philly, the snow is finally melting from the latest winter storm. I'm a little conflicted because I personally love the snow and I'm a big skier, outdoor enthusiast. But as our snow's melting in the city, and we can see that, finally a little bit more light in the city, we see the high or a lot of participation and also uh, extreme heat and extremer temperatures as a part of climate impacts. We can see that happening now. So, at the same time, as we see these adverse climate effects, I've noticed something else that's really hopeful as we're talking to people in our community, as we're doing this work. You all, our community, is really becoming much more intentional about how we can take control. And one of those things is how we think about where our money is going. So we're already frequently supporting local businesses, asking questions about supply chains, using our dollars to reflect our values. These are all things that have been a part of how we can take action. But there's another thing that's a little deeper, and we consider where is my money going? How is it invested? And why is that important? So for many of us, the financial footprint of our 401ks, IRAs, or retirement accounts are a huge part of where that goes. Whether those dollars are invested in fossil fuels, in weapons, other industries we may not agree with. And today's conversation is going to be bringing that awareness and talking about that more. So as you'll see in today's presentations, we'll talk about the legacy of fossil fuels, especially here in Pennsylvania, risks and the realities. We'll dig in what that means to invest in a fossil fuel-free future, how to avoid greenwashing, and practical steps so you can walk away from this webinar and learn and take action. So my hope is by the end of today, you'll feel informed, empowered, hopefully do something different, or maybe start talking, whether that's to an advisor, reviewing your 401k, or just learning more and going on that journey further. So I also see on the investing journey, then the poll, as people are filling that out, it looks like a lot of you are working with financial advisors, running your own investment accounts like IRAs or brokerages, or even approaching retirement, which is great to see. So lots of people are further in their investing journeys today. And we're really, really excited to think about, not just climate action as what we consume or posting on social media, but how we can spend our money wisely in the future. So before we get into today's webinar, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Once again, if you'd like to rename yourself on the chat, we would love to have conversation, hear from you, hear questions. We will keep questions to the end during the Q&A portion. But you can rename yourself in the chat if you go up to your photo, the three dots, and put rename, name organization, title, however you like to name that. You will be muted until the Q&A portion. And then also the webinar will be recorded and sent to you after in case you have to run for anyone who did not catch that originally. So, thanks for being here, and I'm so excited to introduce our first speaker, who was one of our Green Phillies previous esteemed PHL nominees and the deputy director of a policy and action group with one mission, which is to build a greener and healthier world. So, with that, I'd like to introduce Flora Cardoni. Flora, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Julie, and hello, everyone, and welcome. As you just heard, my name is Flora Cardoni, and I'm the Deputy Director with PennEnvironment, here to talk to you today about the legacy of fossil fuels in the Commonwealth, what that means here, and what you can do about it. You can go to the next slide. I do see a lot of our volunteers and members on the chat, so welcome. Thank you all for joining us. And for all the new faces who maybe haven't heard of us before, PennEnvironment is a statewide, citizen-based environmental advocacy nonprofit. We believe that everyone should have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, protected parks to enjoy, and a safe and livable climate powered by clean, renewable energy to call home. And we make that vision a reality by mobilizing citizen support from across Pennsylvania, including in Philadelphia, where I'm based, where a lot of our staff live, to help people make their voices heard to their elected officials so that we can win real results for our environment and climate. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Julie and Green Philly, for putting this together. I'm really excited to have you all here as part of this discussion today. Next slide. Today we'll be talking about the legacy, as I mentioned, of fossil fuel pollution in Pennsylvania, the impacts on our environment, health, and climate, and the solutions we have at our fingertips to help build a cleaner and healthier world. And then I'll hand it over to our other presenters to talk about one way that we can all take action, investing with the environment in mind. So let's get into why that's so important. Next slide. For over a century, Pennsylvania has powered our state and the nation with dirty fossil fuels like coal, oil, and fracked natural gas. As a result, Pennsylvania is the fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the nation. And as you can see in this chart, most of those emissions come from our industrial facilities, from the power generation sector like power plants and mines, and from transportation pollution from cars and trucks. In addition to these emissions here in the state, Pennsylvania is also the second highest fracked gas producing state in the nation and the third largest coal producing state in the nation. And we export those dirty fossil fuels to other states and abroad where they're burned, increasing the Commonwealth's contributions to global emissions even further. Next slide. The legacy of fossil fuels is threatening our planet and our health here in the Commonwealth and around the world. This is because fossil fuels pollute at every stage of their life cycle, from extraction from the ground to processing, transportation, combustion to waste disposal. And all of that pollution is threatening our air, our climate, and our health at every step of the way. For example, burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas pollute our air with ground level ozone, otherwise known as smog, and fine particulate pollution, two harmful air pollutants that increase the risk of premature death, as well as increasing incidence of asthma attacks and other respiratory issues. In fact, particulate pollution from burning fossil fuels was responsible for an estimated 350,000 deaths, or 13% of all deaths in the US in 2018. And around that many Americans die each year as a result of this particulate pollution from the fossil fuel industry. As I mentioned, fossil fuels also pollute our water in a number of ways, whether that's oil spills and pipeline leaks, acid mine drainage into our rivers and streams, fracking wastewater leaks, coal ash pits running into our waterways. And these heavy metals and other toxic pollutants getting into our water can be highly toxic for humans and wildlife, leading to numerous health impacts from liver and kidney damage to heightened risks of cancer. And finally, Fossil fuels, of course, are a major source of the kind of pollution that's causing climate change. Already, the impacts of climate change are all around us. Julie mentioned some of them earlier, but here in Pennsylvania, I like to say that the Commonwealth is getting hotter and wetter. We're seeing more extreme air days, extreme heat days, and bad air days, including right now, as someone mentioned in the chat, elevated levels of PM 2.5 pollution. We're seeing more frequent and intense downpours, flash flooding, and extreme weather events. I think we can all remember 676 totally flooding a few years ago. And we're experiencing warmer winters on average. I know we just had a few weeks of cold, but generally warmer winters, which is increasing tick populations and insect-borne diseases. And of course, around the world, those impacts can be even worse, with devastating droughts and crop shortages in one place and devastating flooding in another. It's increasingly clear that climate change is no longer a distant threat, but rather a present danger. Next slide. I know that in the face of these impacts, many Pennsylvanians are wondering what you can do, what we can do here in the Commonwealth to help clean up our air and water and tackle climate change. And the good news is that we have a lot of solutions at our fingertips today. The scientific community is clear that to prevent the worst impacts of climate change, clean up our air, protect our health, keep our electricity bills down, it's critical that Pennsylvania moves away from these dirty, dangerous fossil fuels and instead leans into clean energy alternatives like wind, solar, and energy efficiency and conservation and battery storage. We have that technology at our fingertips today. It keeps getting better. We have the power, as it were, to move towards this clean, renewable energy future. And the public is behind us. The majority of Pennsylvanians, 70%, want our elected officials to do more to increase clean, renewable energy on the grid. The only thing missing is the political will of our elected officials. And that's where you all come in. There's, of course, a ton of ways that you can take action and make your voice heard to your elected officials to encourage them to embrace clean energy solutions. And I'll talk about some of those at the end of our event today, and we'll follow up with some of those as well via email. But one of the big reasons it's so difficult to get climate solutions to the finish line is the vast influence and power of the fossil fuel industry on our elected officials. And one reason they have so much influence and power is because they have so much money, which means that one of the main things that you can do is to help divest your assets from fossil fuels. So I'm excited to move into the rest of our webinar here to talk about how you can do that and invest with the environment in mind. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Flora. And yeah, we always learn so much from you. So thanks for talking about fossil fuels in PA. Our carbon footprint is huge, unfortunately. So glad we can combat it. And you're doing so much at PennEnvironment to work on that as well. So our next speaker leads Green Century Capital Management's marketing and business development efforts and has over 30 years of experience in environmental advocacy with a concentration to direct marketing efforts to individual supporters. Let's now hear from Gigi Norcross, Vice President, Business Development of Green Century. Take it away, Gigi.
Great. Thanks. Thanks so much, Julie, and thanks everybody for spending a portion of your day here with us. Before I get into Green Century Sustainable Investment Strategy, just a little bit more about me. My name is Gigi. I got started with my concerns for the environment growing up in a beautiful place, West Virginia. I grew up in Kingwood, West Virginia, which is 2 hours south of Pittsburgh. The picture that you're seeing here on the screen is from the Dolly Sods Wilderness area, which is just a beautiful, beautiful place if you've never been. I went to school in West Virginia, and coming right out of college, I took a position with an organization in Massachusetts that did outreach and fundraising on behalf of environmental and public health organizations. And one of my jobs with that network was as the regional director for Mid-Atlantic states based out of Philly. And one of the groups that we worked with is the very organization that Flora works with today. So small world at some level. Coming out of that, I spent a couple of decades as a fundraiser. So organizations of all different kinds would hire my firm to conduct fundraising campaigns, which was very impactful work, raised a lot of money for a lot of good causes. But about 6 years ago, I decided that I really wanted to devote my time and energy and my passion towards the thing that got me started in this work in the first place, and that was the environment. And Green Century had a position available. And while I didn't have any experience in the financial services world, I thought, what better way to generate impact than through a shareholder advocacy strategy, which we'll talk more in the thing. So I thought, let's join Green Century and make an impact by putting people's money to good use. So here we go, and we can move on to the next slide. Green Century is celebrating its 35th birthday this year. The first funds were launched in 1991, so happy birthday to Green Century. We offer 3 mutual funds, and you can see those here in the green box on your screen. The first is an equity fund, all domestic stocks. The second is an international index fund, which is all stocks in 23 developed markets outside of the United States, and a balance fund, which is a popular fund amongst our individual investors like yourselves. That is a mix of stocks and bonds, about 60% stocks and about 40% bonds. We will talk more in a second about the strategy that we use across all of our funds. We have certainly grown a lot in the 35 years that Green Century has been here. We currently are at about $1.3 billion in assets under management. I'm seeing in the chat, will slides be available afterwards? Yes, is the answer to that question. Our impact strategy is really in 3 buckets. So the first is sustainable investment strategies that focus in on getting rid of the most harmful to the environment industry, starting with fossil fuels. We'll talk more about that in a second. The second part of our impact strategy is around advocacy. So as a shareholder, you have power. You have power to communicate to companies that you own as an owner to do better by the planet. And you can do that with more impact if you do it via a mutual fund like ours, because we are behind us are tens of thousands of individuals. Our advocacy program engages companies on a range of different issues, from plastics to forests to clean energy. And that's the second part of our impact. We generate impact by getting companies that we own to do better by the planet. And then the third piece is our ownership structure. We are 100% owned by nonprofit organizations, and that is very unique in the financial services world. You're not going to find another mutual fund company, at least in the United States, that is owned by nonprofit organizations. So what that means is Green Century Capital Management's a business. We deliver a profit to our owners. Those owners then use those profits to do good by the planet and for our health. So the way that Green Century makes impact is first in the investment strategy itself, second in advocacy that we do directly with companies that we own, and third, the profits that we make in the management of our funds go to organizations that are also delivering impact. We can move on to the next slide. Here we have a little bit more on some specifics within that first bucket, the sustainable investment strategy. The first piece of it is, well, big picture, we screen out the most environmentally dangerous of industries, starting with fossil fuels. So across our full mutual fund family, we do not invest in fossil fuels, and we are rigorous in our definition of that. So that is what is in the green box on the left. Then in addition to that, we screen out other environmentally dangerous industries as well, including nukes, civilian firearms and military weapons, tobacco, and GMOs. So that's that. Let's move on to the next piece, which is then why fossil fuel free in particular. Why, if you are an individual investor, might you embrace an investment strategy that divests from fossil fuels? The first answer is because you want to stop supporting an industry that is driving climate change. So you want to align. your investment strategy with your values. The second is that there are lots of other people that are doing that. There are tens of thousands of people and institutions that have chosen to divest from coal and oil and gas companies in a global movement, a global divestment movement. And then finally, a a strategy that avoids fossil fuels might help you to avoid longer term risks that are linked to climate and policy shifts. And let's talk about that in the next slide. One question that people often pose when they are considering aligning their investments with their values is if that then necessarily means a trade in performance. That if you align with your values, that's going to take a hit on your returns. That is not necessarily true. So what this chart shows you is an index with fossil fuels and without. So the blue line that you see on this graph is an index that does not have fossil fuels in it. The orange line or yellow line, depending upon how it appears on your screen, is that same index without fossil fuels. And you can see that for the most part, over this 15-year period of time, the index without fossil fuels performed favorably to the index with. So a chart like this one is helpful when you are talking to friends or family or financial advisors that have questions about, will this sacrifice your returns, and is that what you want to do? Can move on to the next slide. All right, how to find fossil fuels. There are a few tips here, and Carey, when we get to her, will also talk about this in more detail, more practical how-tos, but specifically on fossil fuel-free investments. You look for exclusions on coal, oil, and gas companies, and the document that has to be made available for any mutual fund or ETF that you're looking for is a prospectus. The prospectus it should have clear language around what is and is not in your investment. And exclusions on coal, oil, and gas is one way to know that fossil fuels are not in the mutual fund or the ETF that you're looking at. Secondly, hold 0% in the energy sector is another way. And then finally goes beyond a green sounding name. As I say, Carey's going to talk more about this in her presentation about how to avoid greenwashing, specifically on fossil fuels. There's lots of, funds that are out there that sound good, but if you look under the hood, if you look at that prospectus, then you'll find that it does not have the language that lines up with your values. And so that is something to take a look at. And then I promised that we'd talk a little bit more about shareholder advocacy and the impact that can come from that. If we can move on to the next slide, let's spend a second on advocacy. It's one of the key reasons why I came to Green Century in the first place, is that the advocacy generates real world impact on issues that we care about. We have an in-house team of advocates, a director that is flanked by several other advocates, and they split up the lay of the land with respect to issue areas. So we have a person that focuses on plastics, a person that focuses on forests, a person that focuses on renewable energy and curbing greenhouse gas emissions, and so on and so forth. Those amazing individuals our team has delivered a lot of impact on these issues. In the last 5 years, we've engaged 285 companies. From those engagements, we have secured 93 new environmental policies, and then we have ensured that 47 commitments were implemented. So part of our approach is we engage with companies and have discussions around ways in which they can change their corporate practices for the betterment of the planet. But then we have an in-house team that keeps track of those commitments and follows up to make sure that companies are following through on agreements that they make to us and therefore their shareholders. So to pull out a couple of examples here, Let's talk about plastics. Plastics are a big environmental problem. The proliferation of plastics is probably something that everybody here knows something about. And toys in particular are very plastic intensive, probably the most plastic intensive industry. So we've done a lot of work around plastics and plastics reduction. One of our most significant victories is listed here with Mattel. Mattel creates Hot Wheels and Barbie. Agreed to reduce its plastic packaging by 25%. And that was a commitment that it made several years ago, and they're on track, in fact, ahead of schedule to meet that goal. If you bought a toy, you know the toy is made of plastic. The packaging that it comes surrounded in and the thing that it comes in is all in plastic. And so toy companies that make commitments like this will make a significant difference in terms of the overall amount of plastic that's being generated. Somebody is asking in the chat if they're doing these bad things for the environment, then why invest in them? And that's a great question. Our investment strategy keeps you out of the worst in terms of harm to the environment, but that leaves a lot of other companies that are in and can do better. And that is our approach. It is that we will engage with a Costco, we'll engage with an Apple, we'll engage with an NVIDIA that has a lot of impact through changes that they can make to their corporate strategies that make a real measurable difference for the planet. And that's our approach. Now, on the other hand, you might say, well, taking that a step further, why not then invest in fossil fuels? And our answer on that is fossil fuels, like the nature of the business, is not one that we're going to be able to change. Like you're not going to convince a Starbucks to not make coffee. We're not going to convince a fossil fuel industry to not use fossil fuels. And so in that instance, engagement it isn't really going to move the needle. What will is divestment. So that's what we got on Green Century. Green Century is one example of how you can pursue a sustainable investment path. And so I'll turn things over to somebody else for the how-tos.
Great. Thanks, Eugene. It was really great to see the chart of the fossil fuel versus the non-invest or the vesting scale, because I've definitely heard before of people being like, if you invest from like advisors, like if you invest within the environmental thing, your money won't be as profitable, which is a definitely that's not the case as you just showed us. So next, I'm very pleased to introduce Carey Morgan, who is a partner and financial advisor at Livelihood, a Philadelphia-based fee-only firm that helps people redirect their dollars towards joy, security, and social impact. So, Carey, if you'd like to share more about your role and how we can keep up this fossil fuel-free investing.
Absolutely. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here. I think today, in when we turn on the news, it's very frustrating to hear about all that's going on, as Flora elaborated on. And, this is important because it's one way that we can use our dollars to change things. And I often hear people say, well, it's so small, but it's a lot of small actions from a lot of different people that cause change across time. So I think it's really important that we're all thinking about this, and it's something I do every day in my practice. So I have a career in nonprofit for almost 20 years. But one of the things I noticed working in nonprofit is how important it is for people to direct their dollars to causes that matter to them. And so my business partner and I started this firm, Livelihood, which is an advice-only financial planning firm for people who want their money to reflect their values. So we don't manage your money, but we advise you on how to invest and how to plan your future. And I think a lot of the questions that I get from my clients are around how to do this. And so today I'll be talking about the actual execution of a values-aligned strategy and how you can get started if you haven't started already. Next slide. So you've actually taken the first step. The first step is caring about these issues. And, I think pinpointing one of the issues that you care most about is really important. Making a priority list of those priorities is important. I saw in the chat that somebody mentioned lesser evils and choosing a company that may do great in one hand, may do great on the fossil fuels, but not so well on things like gender diversity. There's never a perfect fund. And I think that's something to keep in mind. You want to understand your own expectations of what you're trying to do with your money in order to execute. And that's the first piece of starting a values aligned strategy. And it's a process, it's never done. You're constantly adjusting because the definitions of how we invest and what makes a good fund and what that data looks like, that's a messy field and it's constantly adjusting. So it's a process that you can continue throughout your lifetime and really become knowledgeable about where your money is and what it's supporting. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of a framework on how I think about this money and this type of investing, because there are a lot of terms out there that are very confusing for people. And I think it's led to a lot of greenwashing and it led to a lot of fear on behalf of people who want to do this work and want to invest this way, but are afraid that they are somehow going to be taken advantage of investing in things that say they're doing well in the community and for the earth, but aren't. So how I think about it is think about environmental social governance as the broadest circle here. And really what that is about metrics and practices. So these are checklists of outcomes and outputs that companies measure in their own company, and that we look at across an industry, although sometimes there's not a lot of consensus on what those measurements are. But what they're really looking at by measuring these things is how would the performance of the stock price be impacted by some level of irresponsibility? So if you have a lot of warning flags going up around a specific issue, say a data breach or an environmental practice, what risk is there to the stock price? That's kind of the broadest view of ESG. SRI, so again, very little consensus. It used to be terms social responsible investing. Now a lot of people use sustainable and responsible investing. So this terminology is ever evolving, but it's a little more, I would say, intentional with what you want to do with your money. So this is where I think Gigi's points about what Green Century does, it comes off really well. So they're looking at what are they screening out? What strategies and issues are they trying to exclude from the portfolio? And also, what are they trying to include? What good practices, what aspirational practices do you want to invest in with your money? And I think what's really important, as Gigi pointed out, is this piece around shareholder activism, which a lot of people don't realize how much of their dollars are influential in changing policies and companies. And I think that's particularly true if you're doing it through a mutual fund with a knowledgeable manager that has a dedicated team trying to promote more responsible policies. So overall, SRI investing is really looking at what are the non-financial impacts of my investment. And then you get to a even smaller subset of investments, which are impact investments. These are very intentional investments in companies where doing good is the core mission. And often these are very local investments, and we have an abundance of them in Philadelphia. So you're talking about how can you proactively support businesses that are doing good in the community. That's just a simple framework. And now we can move to the next slide. And a lot of our clients come to us with no knowledge of the financial system. So I wanted to kind of take a step and just lay out the framework, because the overall framework of investments and where they sit in your portfolio can impact how your values strategy is executed. So if we think, I use the analogy of grocery shopping. If you think of stocks, which are little bits of ownership in a company, and bonds, which are little bits of debt, so you're lending money to a government or a corporation, and they're giving you interest for that loan, essentially. Those are the fruits that go into baskets. Those baskets of stocks and bonds are ETFs and mutual funds. They're just groupings of specific companies. Those go into larger baskets, and those baskets, carriages, kind of define how you're going to be taxed. So you have your 401ks, which are often pre-tax, although more Roth ones are emerging. You have Roth accounts, which are after-tax money, and you have taxable accounts, which are your brokerage accounts. And those types of accounts are all held at a custodian. So a lot of times those will be Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, Merrill, all of the names that you've heard about. And sometimes there's a broker that executes trades for you, although more and more we're seeing people who do it themselves on these platforms. And that's totally fine. I think we're democratizing investing, and that gives you more power to do this yourself. Next slide. So when we're looking at how to really start with this strategy, you want to start with what you own. Generally, people, and I saw in the poll, people have different types of accounts and are on different parts of this journey around values-aligned investing. In general, if you're using an employer account, the employer is picking what investments are available for you to invest in. So the choices around those investments are going to be minimal. I have seen more providers offering values-aligned investing, but it's not as common as it should be. Where you have more leeway is in your personal accounts. So your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, and your brokerage accounts. And that's where you have this wide range, very diverse universe of investments that you can choose from, whether that's stocks, mutual funds, ETFs. You have a much broader range. So you want to ask yourself, well, where is my money right now? And what is it supporting? Is it aligned with my values? Next slide. So how to understand that is by looking first at what your intention is. So going back to that idea that you want to set an intention for your money. Are you hoping to exclude fossil fuels? Are you hoping to exclude companies that are actively deforesting? Are you wanting to put solar energy or wind energy into your portfolio? And how much do you want to engage in shareholder advocacy? You don't have to have a static strategy, but it's good to start somewhere. And a lot of people start with the exclusionary strategy because they have very strong feelings about what they don't want to invest in. The next piece is to really look at who is managing this money. So what mutual funds do you have, and what is the track record for that mutual fund manager or that ETF manager to do this process with integrity? And I think this is really where a lot of the confusion comes in. And when I started my company, I used to go down the rabbit hole of looking at mass amounts of data. Often the sources for the data didn't match in terms of their interpretation of what a company was doing. Very messy. That's okay. But I think a more streamlined and strategic approach is really looking at the managers who are doing the frontline work at looking at companies in depth, know what they're looking for, and creating these mutual funds and ETFs that are nice packages, and then doing the shareholder advocacy behind them. And if you can find a mutual fund manager that is doing that process rigorously and with intention and with integrity, then you're way further down on the path than you would be if you were individually looking at each company alone. So I really think that's a really promising way to look at this without becoming overwhelmed. And then you can take an outside vetting source, and I've named a few: US CIF, As You Sow, or a values-based financial advisor like myself. And there are many out there that are kind of looking at different sets of data to see which are most aligned with what your intention is. And that data can be very fun to go down that rabbit hole, but again, it can be overwhelming. Next slide. So what are you looking for? And Gigi alluded to this before, specifically in her presentation. But you're looking for things. Red flags are vague language. So I think we all know terms like sustainable and ESG are overused, and are often a sign that it might be more of a marketing term. You want to look and see whether there is any substance behind what the manager or the promoter of the fund is saying. If they don't have transparency, if you can't find that data, if it's not in the prospectus, then it's likely they're not actually doing the hard work. Marketing coming out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they have a big marketing scheme that you see everywhere that's rebranding a fund as sustainable. Again, look beneath the hood and see if that's actually happening. Is there a change in their holdings, or is it the same fund called something else? Using ESG ratings to justify sustainability claims. A lot of these ratings mechanisms are not in agreement, and you have to look at who is funding those rating mechanisms and whether they have integrity. Again, the data gets very messy. And are they following through on what they say they're going to do? What are the outcomes? Are they reporting on the outcomes? All of these things are really, they're red flags, but if they pass all of these tests, you might have a really good fund that you could be proud of owning. Next slide. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit, because I think people, again, I'm not from the financial industry until recently, until the past 6 years. And I know a lot of people have fears about using financial advisors because the industry does have a bad record of not being transparent. And when you're doing this type of advising, you really want somebody who is transparent in their approach. So the things you're looking for with a values-based financial advisor are finding a fiduciary, meaning they are legally obligated to act in your best interest 100% of the time. Understanding how they're paid, be sure to ask questions about that. Understanding how they define values-aligned investing. Are they using the exclusionary approach, or are they just putting things in there that say they're ESG? Do they understand your values? Because values are relative. They fall across the spectrum. So you want to understand, you want them to be able to understand your goals too. And welcome questions. You should be able to ask your advisor any question without judgment. and stay away if they're making guarantees about anything, whether that's performance guarantees or kind of values impact guarantees. If they're not being specific in terms of conflicts and disclosing those conflicts, and are they transparent about their process? Uh, those are the things that I would tell people to look for in a financial advisor. And if you can find one who's values based, they might get you a little further on your journey. And I think that's it for me.
Great.
Thank you.
And oh, thank you so much, Carey. We really appreciate that explanation. And I see the chat has had a lot of really engaging questions. Some have been answered as we were talking about this, but there are other questions that we do have and want to hear from you in the audience. So a couple of quick notes as we launch into the Q&A portion. If you'd like to ask a question, can you please raise your hand? You go to the bottom of your screen to the React button. There should be a raise hand feature, so you can do that. That's one way to call you. And if you, in case you missed it, you can just rename yourself before if you are named as someone else as by the three dots in the corner. And we will be sending those slides, some of the resources you will get after this as well. So I did want to, there was also a Q&A in the chat I wanted to kick off with. I'm not sure if this be Gigi or Carey wants to answer, but what are some indicators that someone's money is invested in fossil fuels?
Carey, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think using one of those tools, I don't think you're going to know just from looking at the name. I think you have to dig deeper. Using one of those tools like As You Sow or USIF, that sort of data, running it through, that will give you a sense of what it's invested in and whether it is invested in fossil fuels. I would just start there and then start, once you read that information, maybe then read deeper in the prospectus to understand what it's actually invested in.
Then I would follow up on that with we have a rigorous definition of what it means to be fossil fuel free. Low carbon does not mean fossil fuel free. So really look at the prospectus to see if fossil fuel free is defined. Another resource that I would point you to, if we go back a slide or two, and we probably want to also make sure that we give people time to scan the QR codes for others. We have produced, alongside Green America, another great publication, a sustainable investing guide, which gives guidelines on things just like this. So you can snap that QR code to get to the sustainable investing guide. And then this will also be part of the materials that comes out as a follow-up.
Great. Thank you. And Bruce, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to ask a question?
I want to make a comment. I'm an 80-year-old Quaker. I first started ethically investing the very little bit of money I had. All my life, I worked in nonprofits and Pax World Fund, which was a great fund. In the chat, I've noted that about 10 years ago, I transferred my now somewhat more substantial investments to Prentice Smith and Company. I don't know if any of you know of this, but it's a family-owned, terrific, with terrific policies. I've described them somewhat in the chat. It was started in 1982. They have around $600 million in investments and terrific policies and really good service. And Prentice Smith himself lives in Mount Airy. He runs the company. So I want to put in a plug for that and also say, just in general, that yeah, I mean, I haven't made out like bandits, but all my money's been invested ethically for the last 40 years. and we're very comfortable. It really means a lot. Okay.
Thanks for your comment. Uh, all right. And Peter, do you have a question for our presenters?
Yeah, I do. Thanks. For a question for Gigi, actually. On one of your slides, I thought said look for a fund that had 0% in the energy sector. And my question to you is, does that not then exclude us from investing in clean energy, or is that listed as a different category?
Listed as a different category. Clean energy is typically included within the utilities sector rather than the energy sector.
Any other questions from our participants that would like to raise their hands? You can do that in the bottom feature if you push that react button and then the raise hand feature. In the meantime, there was also a question. I believe this would be for you, Gigi. Someone asked if they can buy your funds through Vanguard.
You buy our funds through Vanguard? Well, the thing that you can do is just look and see. So on the materials that you'll receive as a follow-up, you will see for each of our funds what the tickers are. It's a 5-character thing, and so you can go on to where you do your thing and put in our ticker and see if it's available. The other thing that I'd like to pull out is somebody was saying that they got it was a TIAA person where they were able to change from something that they didn't want to be invested into something that was more aligned. I'd like to say that is something like you don't a 401k has environmentally responsible, sustainable options because people said to their employers, hey, we want these options. So make sure that you use your voice when it comes to your investment choices. Your 401k may not now have a sustainable or environmentally responsible option, but that doesn't mean that it can't. So, you use your power as an employee as well to get your company to embrace having options that are more aligned with your values.
Great. And I saw in the chat, as this says, we have a couple of hands raised as well. But since we're on the topic of Green Century, someone asked how Green Century enforces the commitments of businesses that have claimed to avoid fossil fuel, plastics, protected forests, etc. So do you have a response to that one as well?
Can you actually repeat that just to make sure that I've got the question right?
Sure. Sorry, it was wordy. Oh, wait. Okay. How does Green Century enforce the commitments of businesses that have claimed to avoid fossil fuel, plastics, protect forests, etc.?
Yeah. The way that we do that is by having a dedicated in-house advocacy team. So we have a dedicated in-house advocacy team that, it is their job every year to extract commitments from companies to deploy a corporate practice that is more environmentally responsible. And then we follow up with those companies year over year. So a good example is Verizon is a holding in one of our funds. We had a multi-year negotiation with Verizon that ended with them agreeing to move from 4% of their operations, relying upon clean sources of energy, renewable energy, to 50% of their energy coming from renewable sources. That's the equivalent of taking 500,000 cars off the road every year from the move of one company. We got that commitment in 2018, and the goal was to have it implemented by 2025. And last year we were able to celebrate that they had met that objective. And it wasn't because they agreed to it and then in 2025 we checked in and all was good. It was because our team got the commitment in the first place, and then did regular follow-up, and then asked for things like somebody was saying in the chat, or Carey was saying in her presentation, there needs to be impact reports, there needs to be disclosure. And so all the way along the way, we were working with this company to get the benchmarks so that we could see that they were on track towards meeting this big objective.
Great. Thank you. And Christine, do you have a question for our presenters? I think you're still, oh, there you go.
I'm wondering about the impact of AI. I know that a lot of ESG funds do invest in the big tech companies that are funding the AI, and they're not always doing the AI in the most ecologically responsible manner. I mean, AI is these data centers are such huge consumers of power and water. So there's a tremendous draw upon the power grid, and that may affect, how much dirty electricity is generated and so forth. So I don't know if this is a Green Century question or who's the best person to ask here.
I think we should probably answer it from a few different. So Flora from the policy end, and then us from the investment end. So Flora, do you want to tackle it first?
Yes, I'll put a chat. I'll first say that there's a report our groups collaborated on, PennEnvironment and partner groups across the country, looking at the environmental harms of data centers. And I'll put that in the chat for those who are wondering. This is an emerging threat for sure. There's lots of policies pending in the state legislature, and I definitely encourage you to make your voice heard to your elected officials about your concerns, whether that's, related to pollution, energy bills, and the strain on our grid, or increasing fossil fuel pollution. So we don't have time, I think, to go into specifics of all the bills, but I'll just say there's definitely a ton of bills pending, a ton of conversation, and you don't need to know all the details if you want to call your elected official and say, I'm concerned about this because I'm concerned about our climate and our air.
Yeah, I've already done that. I would just want to understand about the investment part.
Yeah. So then on the investment part, we are working in collaboration with other investors to keep figuring out ways in which to use our advocacy to make sure that companies that are embracing AI are doing so in responsible ways. So it's a big enough topic that one firm like Green Century isn't going to be able to do this on our own. And so we've joined others to collaborate to figure out what where the right places to engage are. And so we're thinking about that with respect to holdings like NVIDIA and others. So I think the answer to your question is it's an emerging thing. It's a concern for a lot of our investors. And so what we are doing is figuring out ways to most strategically collaborate with others on shareholder resolutions that can make a difference.
Great. Thank you. And I see we are at 2:02. I know we have had officially an hour. There's at least one additional question, and we can stay on for a few minutes to answer those if the presenters are okay with that. In the meantime, just want to mention thank you all for attending. Thank you to Green Century also for helping present this webinar today. And also, as a reminder, because I know there's been a few questions in the chat, we will be sending the link to the recording as well as the slides. So you're definitely welcome to, look at that information. Also, we'll send contact info and the resources from today as well. So watch out for your email for the wrap-up email. Just some fun, logistical pieces wanted to mention if anyone falls off. But in the meantime, Eric, would you like to ask a question to our panelists?
Yes, thank you. I'm active in Third Act Pennsylvania, which is an elder group involved with the climate, and we do a lot with climate finance. And one of the issues that, of course, our folks have is many of our members have a lot of money in retirement accounts and been looking for things like Green Century. And how do we, if go about investing in something like your fund, Gigi? Can we do it directly, or is this something that we need to be working through either our advisors or TIAA or Vanguard or whomever?
Yes, 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 and yes. So first of all, thank you for your activism with Third Act. We've worked with Third Act organizations in a number of different locations, including, participating in their Sun Day earlier this year, which was great fun. You can invest in Green Century directly. And so you can go to our website, you can open an account, and then you can be invested directly. If you already have a Fidelity account or a Schwab account, you can also invest that way. Our funds are widely available on platforms like that. With respect to 401ks, that's a little more complicated because you then have to convince the 401k to include a fund like Green Century as an option. And that it just starts with a conversation. Carey, do you have more input on that piece of it, that piece of Eric's question?
I think Gigi, you're right. I think the best way to start if you want to get something put into your 401k, an option put into your 401k, is actually gather a group beforehand of people who feel similarly, who are in the plan, because that's just going to give you more power to convince them. It's not hard to add an option to a 401k plan, but depending on who the custodian is or the plan sponsor and how rigid their criteria are, they might make it more difficult. So the more voices you have advocating for changes to the investment options, the more likely it'll be that they'll add the ones you want.
Thank you.
Great. And there was a question in the chat earlier asking about mineral companies are expected to be profitable, and are those companies to be avoided for investments? If there's a stance there.
We do not have a screen on minerals per se. We have a screen on pesticides and toxic chemicals on our balance fund, and we have a screen on other things, but not that by itself.
Great. And there's just one final question. Could you confirm that broad EFTs, like those that mirror the S&P 500, are invested in fossil fuels?
Probably. It just depends on which one you're looking at. So
great.
So the answer to that is look at the ETF and look at its prospectus to sort out whether or not it's in fossil fuels.
Great. Well, thank you again to all the panelists sharing their great knowledge today. I really learned a lot about fossil fuels, where my money is going, and have some action steps. I think there's a lot of also really great resources in the chat and from each of our panelists. So as I mentioned, on behalf of Green Philly, I'm Julie, the number one, I was going to say, besides the other ones in the chat right now. But just kidding, the OG. Anyway, we will follow up with surveys. If you fill that out, let us know how today's webinar was. We also had the poll. Looks like a lot of people are very likely to review accounts after today's webinar, so that's great news. We will also send resources to the panelists. You can learn more from them, talk to them directly, and learn how to start your sustainable investing journey. So thanks again, and hope everyone has a great day.